Ah, Secretary Harper ate all of that earlier. But at my single sentence, the face of my husband, who until a moment ago was smiling and telling me to live a long and healthy life, turned as white as a sheet of paper. Pregnant Secretary Harper pushed the empty bowl away and wiped her mouth, while my husband grabbed the back of his neck and stumbled. The white powder inside the gourmet lobster bisque, a small pill vial inside the drawer, and a single photograph that would tear down 15 years of marriage. On that day, in the CEO corner office, I saw my husband's true face. Before the story begins, I wish you a day full of good luck. Today's story begins now. The moment I placed my hand on the brass doorknob of the CEO suite on the 19th floor, the normally heavy handle felt oddly slippery, wrapping around my palm. Pushing the door open and stepping inside, a bowl of steaming lobster bisque placed at a perfect, prop-like angle right in the middle of the mahogany desk immediately caught my eye. My husband, Julian Sterling, pushed his chair back from across the desk and stood up, wearing an awkward smile I had never once seen in our 15 years of marriage. "Are you here, honey? Do not just stand there. Take a seat. I purposely went all the way to that high-end deli you love this morning. It is your favorite lobster bisque." I transferred it to a proper bowl and heated it up myself. "It tastes bad if it gets cold. Come on, eat up quickly." Hearing a man who had never even boiled a pot of instant macaroni for my sake suddenly claim he personally prepared a bowl of hot soup made his tone and hand gestures feel like mismatched gears, grinding uselessly against each other. Still, thinking I needed to smile like someone who knew absolutely nothing, I slowly pulled up the corners of my mouth and took a seat at the chair across the desk. "What is the occasion? You even taking care of my breakfast. I am grateful, but it is a bit out of character. This is the first time in 15 years? Did something happen?" My husband walked around the desk, placed his hand on my shoulder, and awkwardly stroked the line of my shoulder with his palm. I clearly felt a chilling goosebump rise along my spine at every spot his touch lingered. "I have been a bit inattentive lately. But I am your husband. Do you think I would not notice when you look so exhausted? Do not be suspicious of people for no reason, and just eat. I bought it from an expensive place. When someone shows sincerity, you should know how to accept it." At that exact moment, the cell phone on the desk rang urgently. My husband flinched, his shoulders twitching as he checked the screen, and he made a show of stepping out into the hallway, claiming it was a call from an important client. "Hold on a second. It is an important call. Do not wait for me, just keep eating. It tastes bad if it gets cold. I hope to see an empty bowl when I get back. Got it?" Quietly watching my husband's back as he closed the office door and stepped out, I slowly picked up the spoon and stirred the surface of the thick bisque. A few grains of white powder that had settled at the edge of the bowl slightly floated up along the tip of the spoon, then quietly sank back into the rich soup. The sight entered my vision with absolute clarity. It felt as if my heart beat backward for a second, but I purposely took a deep breath and slowly calmed the trembling in my fingertips. I took my cell phone out of my handbag and calmly took photos of the inside of the bowl, the spot where the powder had surfaced, and the white grains stuck to the texture of the spoon. Next, I stood up from my seat and slightly pulled the edge of the desk drawer. A small pill vial with its label half-covered caught my eye, reflecting at a slanted angle between a pile of documents. Without laying a single fingertip on it, I recorded a short video keeping that exact slanted angle intact, then returned to my original seat. On one wall of the office hung a large framed family portrait taken on our 10th wedding anniversary. In the photo, I was smiling brightly with my arm linked through my husband's. The moment that beaming face overlapped in a single frame with the spoon resting above the bowl on the desk, I felt as if I could hear something slowly crumbling somewhere deep inside my chest. Right then, the office door carefully opened, and Secretary Harper Quinn stepped inside, her face looking somewhat yellowish and fatigued, holding a leather portfolio. "Oh, Mrs. Sterling, you came all the way up here. I just had some urgent documents for the CEO to sign. I know the CEO's schedule best, so I stepped in for a moment." I did not miss the way Harper supported her swollen pregnant belly lightly with one hand, while placing the portfolio on the edge of the desk with the other, taking a sly, sidelong glance at the steaming bowl of soup. Rising slowly from my chair, I quietly scanned Harper's swollen belly from head to toe, then opened my mouth in my usual calm voice. "Secretary Harper, a pregnant woman should not work on an empty stomach. It just so happens the CEO bought this lobster bisque for me to eat. You look like you are struggling with morning sickness, so please, you eat this. You do not need to decline." A brief hesitation flashed across Harper's face, but that hesitation did not feel genuine. Rather, it came across like a well-rehearsed line of acting. Oh my, I couldn't possibly eat something the CEO specifically prepared for you, Mrs. Sterling. It was such a sweet gesture from him. I really shouldn't take it. I slowly pushed the bowl toward Harper and added a line of a smile to the corners of my mouth. It is fine. I am giving it to you to eat. We are all part of the company family after all. Starving a pregnant woman does not sit well with my conscience. Eat it before it gets cold. Declining once is enough. The moment those words ended, Harper, as if she had been waiting, pulled the bowl toward herself with both hands and perched slightly on the chair in front of the desk. Well, if it is your word, Mrs. Sterling, it would be rude of me to refuse. Thank you for the meal. Honestly, my stomach has been empty since morning because I could not eat anything. Perhaps because the CEO bought it, the smell is just wonderful. Quietly watching a faint flush of color return to the back of Harper's hand as she held the spoon, I did not yet know what the white powder was. However, I dropped one chilling conclusion deep into my chest. Absolutely none of this soup must enter my mouth. While Harper greedily scooped up the bisque, 1 spoonful, 2 spoonfuls, as if someone might steal it from her, I purposely took a couple of steps back toward the window, pretending to look down at the landscaping, and secretly took one more photo with my phone. Right as the bowl was nearly showing its bottom, the office door opened again, and my husband walked in, smiling brightly, having finished his call. Honey, did you eat it all? Wow, the bowl is completely clean. You really do know good food when you see it. It tastes just like our favorite deli, right? Do you feel your body getting a bit better? Upon discovering the empty bowl, my husband let out a relieved smile, like someone who had just finished a long overdue homework assignment, and lightly patted my shoulder. That is my lovely wife. When I take care of you like this, you should eat well without any complaints. You emptied the whole bowl clean. Yes, honey, you must live a very, very long and healthy life. You absolutely must. Got it? Feeling goosebumps rise once again at the spot his touch lingered, I did not let my expression falter even slightly and merely gave a quiet nod. At that exact moment, Harper wiped a drop of bisque from her mouth with the back of her hand and interjected boastfully. CEO, I was the one who ate that soup. Mrs. Sterling was so affectionate, insisting that it would be terrible for a pregnant woman to starve, and she yielded it to me. I emptied it all without leaving a single spoonful. Maybe because Mrs. Sterling gave it to me, or maybe because of your sincerity, CEO, it tasted absolutely like honey. I quietly watched straight on as my husband's complexion turned to the color of dirt in a single instant. What? What did you say? Harper, why did you eat that? Who told you to eat that? That was put there for my wife to eat. You ate it all without leaving a single spoonful. Are you kidding me right now? Did you really eat it all? One early morning last Thanksgiving, in my in-laws' kitchen, I was peeling potatoes for the mashed potatoes, the one traditional dish Eleanor insisted I make from scratch every year. As the smell of turkey filled the house, I stared at my own exhausted face in the window, thinking, this is the last year. This is the absolute last year I play this part. I absent-mindedly faced my own exhausted face reflected in the dark window. As the smell of cooking oil clung to the ceiling and settled quietly in one corner of the kitchen, the voice of my mother-in-law, Eleanor, making a phone call to my sister-in-law's relatives, drifted out from the master bedroom, mixing with the sound of the television. Oh my Susan, did you hear my son's company revenue doubled again this quarter? It is all because our family's bloodline is superior. Who else is doing could it possibly be? My hand, which had been flipping the food, paused for a moment, but soon silently continued the motion of scooping the next batch of batter. At the dining table in the living room, my husband, Julian, was tearing open a crate of premium imported Wagyu beef that my own parents had sent as a holiday gift. Honey, send 2 cuts of this to Director Smith at our client firm, 1 to VP Miller, and 1 to our regional manager. I will have the secretary send you all the addresses, so just handle the packaging for me. Wiping my hands on my apron, I took a step toward the living room and carefully added a word. My father specifically bought and sent that as a holiday gift for us. If you send it all away to business clients, what about my younger brother's family? My husband lifted a chunk of Wagyu beef from the cardboard box, gave it a light shake, and let out a scoffing laugh. Whether it is sent from your parents' house or I receive it from the company, it all comes out of our household budget anyway. What is the difference? Distributing this to clients is what keeps our company alive in the end. Eleanor finally stepped out of the master bedroom, stood casually in front of the beef crate, and without even glancing at her daughter-in-law, directed her words only to her son. Julian, you still need to send a cut to your brother's house. You're the older sibling. You need to step up and do the right thing for the holidays. Under the fluorescent light of the kitchen, the fact that my name was never once called out in relation to the gift sent by my own parents shone coldly. A few days later, at a gathering of the in-law siblings, my brother-in-law set his whiskey glass down with a loud thud on the table and nudged his older brother's shoulder. "Hey man, transfer some of the company shares to my name. I am your actual blood brother. I cannot just sit around sucking my thumb, right?" My husband shot a quick sideways glance at me, shrugged his shoulders, and answered smoothly, all right, I will take care of it. It is our family's company anyway, why would I not give you your share?" Listening quietly from the kitchen, I meticulously trimmed an onion on the cutting board one more time with the tip of my knife and set it down. Then, one late autumn afternoon, I received a call from my younger brother, Nolan, saying that our mother had collapsed from a stroke and had been rushed to the emergency room. Gripping the edge of the kitchen sink with one hand, I barely managed to gather strength in my collapsing legs. As soon as I hung up, I informed my husband, who happened to be in the living room, of the situation in a trembling voice. "Honey, my mom suddenly collapsed. They say she is in the ER right now. Let us go together." Buttoning his suit jacket without lifting his head even once, my husband replied, "You know I have a networking dinner scheduled today. You know better than anyone how the company functions if I skip even once. Just go on ahead first. I will see if I can make it after it ends." That single phrase, "after it ends," never led to him crossing the hospital threshold, even after a week, then 10 days had passed. One morning, after sleeping fitfully on a cot next to my mother's hospital bed and going straight to work, my husband ran into me in the company lobby. Standing in front of client CEOs, he looked me up and down and threw out a mocking comment. "Honey, you are the CEO's wife. What is with that face without a single drop of makeup? You need to pay attention to your appearance when our clients are looking. It is an embarrassment to the company." While the client CEOs standing next to him let out awkward laughs, I barely pulled up the corners of my mouth to offer a greeting. When I returned home that night, I quietly placed my mother's hospital bill on the dining table. Eleanor came out of her bedroom and purposely slammed the china cabinet door shut with a loud bang. "Your family's issues should be handled by your family. Why are you placing a scrap of paper like that on our dining table? It is not like people do not know my son runs a business. Are you shoving this in our faces, asking us to chip in or what?" I neatly folded the bill with both hands, pushed it deep into my bag, and firmly bit the inside of my lip. A few days later, at the company's anniversary dinner, my husband held a microphone in front of the employees and smiled brightly. "Do not treat my wife like some grand lady. Just treat her comfortably, exactly like one of our regular employees. If she plays the grand madam at home and brings that attitude to the company, it makes everyone uncomfortable, right?" Amidst the employees clapping awkwardly, the sight of Secretary Harper Quinn sitting at the next table, slightly twisting the corners of her mouth into a smirk, pierced straight into the center of my chest. One winter night when he was frequently working late, I was organizing my husband's corporate credit card statements on the dining table. Even when I discovered payment records for maintenance fees on a luxury condo in Soho and lines of restaurant charges that could hardly be considered client meetings, my expression did not falter. Instead, I quietly photographed each statement with my cell phone camera, then stacked them neatly back in their original place. Around that time, Eleanor would often massage her side and throw comments in her daughter-in-law's direction. "From where I stand, is it not about time you slowly step aside?" I am just saying this because I feel sorry for my son, living with a wife who cannot even give him a single child. Without adding a single word to Eleanor's comment, I merely continued polishing a fine silver spoon to a shine for the holiday table. When everyone was asleep that night, I knelt in front of a small safe tucked away in the deepest part of my closet. Slowly turning the combination dial and opening the door, a faded yellow envelope resting neatly at the very top came into view. Taking the papers out one by one, a promissory note written in my father's neat handwriting, a copy of the investment agreement, and a copy of the shareholder ledger, drawn up when the company was founded, remained vividly alive. The scene from a spring day 15 years ago on my wedding day, when my father handed a thick envelope to his son-in-law with both hands, sprang vividly back to my fingertips. "I am not just giving you this money. I am lending it as seed money for your company, and you must officially register a 60% stake under Claire's name. That is the final request our couple has for you as our son-in-law." Adding the $200,000 of severance pay I received from my previous job to my parents' $500,000 retirement fund, the sound of the notary stamp hitting the paper on the day that $700,000 entered the company's first bank account rang clearly in my ears once again. Throughout our marriage, whenever the holidays rolled around, my husband would affectionately hold my hand, asking me to stamp my signature just once for a name transfer. Eleanor would chime in from the side, saying that since we were all one family anyway, it would be better to clean things up by putting everything under the son-in-law's name. Every time that happened, the memory of the hand my father held onto for the last time before he passed away came to mind, and I ultimately never once took pen to paper for that signature. As I quietly traced the edge of the promissory note with my fingertips, it felt as though my parents' retirement fund and the severance pay of my youth were rising vividly in a single line above the ink stains. A scene of holding hands on that spring wedding day 15 years ago, and a scene of a dark autumn morning frying meatballs at 5:30 in the kitchen, quietly overlapped into one place in my mind. Hugging the promissory note, the investment agreement, and the shareholder ledger copy to my chest with both hands deep in the closet, I knelt there in the darkness for a long time that night. My husband's lips turned a pale blue, and each syllable leaked out as if trembling, but Harper, yet to grasp the meaning of that tremble, smiled brightly. "What is wrong, CEO, Mrs. Sterling said it out, but she insisted a pregnant woman should not starve and yielded it to me. My husband stumbled back a step, grabbing the back of his neck with his palm. His fingertips clutched the collar of his dress shirt, causing a button to pop off and roll onto the carpet. "No, no, you were not supposed to eat that. That was not made for you to eat." That single sentence escaping my husband's mouth instantly froze the air in the office. The smile hanging on Harper's lips slowly vanished, and the sight of her yellowish face hardening entirely unfolded right before my eyes. My husband reached out trying to grab the edge of the desk, swiped at the empty air, and crashed heavily onto the carpet, knees first. Taking one step back, I slowly swept my gaze like a camera capturing a single frame. My collapsed husband, Harper, who was now finally clutching her belly with both hands, and the empty soup bowl on the desk. At that moment, 15 years of long history began to unfold all at once in my mind, like a single faded family photograph. A certain autumn morning facing my aging face reflected in the window while making holiday food in the dark kitchen at 5:30. My hunched back as I slept fitfully on the cot next to my mother's hospital bed. Everything flashed through my mind at once. And at the very core of all those scenes, tightly bound and sleeping deep inside the closet safe, rested the heavy weight of the promissory note, the investment agreement, and the shareholder ledger copy. On the day of the company's anniversary gala, as I entered the venue, I immediately crossed paths with Harper, who was dressed in an elegant burgundy evening gown, greeting guests at the entrance. Supporting an event clipboard lightly with one hand, Harper smiled brightly and took a step closer. "Mrs. Sterling, the seating for today has been specially arranged. The seats next to the CEO are reserved for client executives, so we have placed your seat at the table way in the back." In Harper's expression as she pointed to the furthest table, a long way from the center head table, a completely different shade of a smile was faintly spreading compared to when she brought portfolios into the office. I quietly looked at the far table following her fingertip, and, without letting my expression falter, slowly moved my steps toward the edge. In front of the employees who had moved to the after-party, my husband Julian, holding a drink in one hand, naturally placed his other hand on Harper's shoulder and laughed brightly. "Our secretary Harper is so good at her job. Honestly, rather than my wife, Secretary Harper, feels more like the real lady of this company. Right, everyone?" While the employees let out awkward laughs, I firmly embedded that single scene into my mind, like someone taking a photograph. A few days after the event, I secretly met with the accounting director in a small conference room at the far end of the accounting department in the main building. The director lifted a thick financial file with both hands, quietly placed it on the desk, and opened his mouth in a low voice. "Mrs. Sterling, I brought this separately because I found it strange while reviewing it. A set amount is recorded as going to a client every month, but when I looked up the corporate registry, it is a new entity created last year, a shell company with almost no actual business operations." I traced the wire transfer records the director pointed out with my fingertip, one line at a time, until I discovered a name registered as the representative at the very bottom, a name belonging to a close associate of Harper. "Director, please make a separate note of this company representative's name, and please ensure this transfer flow absolutely does not leak to any other department lines." The accounting director nodded deeply, then discreetly slipped a single sheet of paper from the pile of approval documents and pushed it across the desk to me. Taking the paper, I instantly recognized that it was a residential lease agreement for a luxury condo in Soho. The tenant line clearly bore the name and signature of my husband Julian, while the actual residence section clearly stated the name Harper Quinn. How did this document end up in your hands, Director? The director pushed up his glasses and briefly dropped his gaze to the file on the desk. It was accidentally mixed into a pile of documents the secretary's office sent down from the CEO's suite for filing. I initially thought it was a misfiling, but once I saw the signatures, I could not just bury it. Holding the lease agreement quietly with both hands, I spent a long time silently etching every single letter into my eyes. On my way out of the conference room, walking past the CEO's suite hallway, the bright screen of the cell phone sitting on my husband's empty desk caught my eye. Right in the middle of the screen, a text message notification hovered clearly, the name of an Upper East Side fertility clinic, along with a reminder for a routine prenatal checkup at 3:00 p.m., the day after next. I heard the footsteps of my husband turning the corner at the end of the hallway after his phone call, but I quietly stored the phone screen in my memory one last time before slowly slipping out of the office. That evening, in the in-laws' living room, Eleanor tapped her side in front of the television and loudly dropped a remark meant for her daughter-in-law to hear. When I think about how Julian almost ruined our family's legacy by marrying the wrong woman, I still wake up in a cold sweat. If a woman could just give us a grandchild, I'd welcome her into this family, no matter where she came from. Peeling an apple in the corner of the living room, I stopped the blade completely against the skin of the apple and did not add a single word. The next afternoon, my younger brother Nolan visited the company lobby dressed in a neat suit. When Nolan walked straight past the secretary's desk and up to the door of the CEO's office, my husband slowly stood up from his seat and narrowed his brow. "Brother-in-law, what brings you here? You should have contacted me before coming." Standing firmly on both feet in front of the CEO's desk, Nolan looked his brother-in-law straight in the eye and spoke. "Julian, I need to see exactly how my sister's company shares are currently structured. With our mother lying in a hospital bed, as her brother, it is only right I know where and how our family's $700,000 is operating." My husband lightly slammed his palm on the desk, twisted the corner of his mouth, and threw out a mocking remark. "This is not a place for a brother-in-law to interfere. For a wife's family member to march into the company and demand answers between a married couple, that goes against basic decency. You should leave." Nolan's shoulders heaved once, but unable to continue his words right there, he had to turn around, only hearing the sound of the office door shutting behind his back. Meeting with the accounting director again that night, I compared the corporate registry, the shareholder ledger, and the investment agreement line by line, tracing them with my fingertip. "Director, so you are confirming that the 60% stake registered 15 years ago has survived completely intact, without being diluted even once during any capital increase process?" The director tapped his approval stamp lightly and replied in a calm voice. "That is correct, Mrs. Sterling. The CEO attempted a name transfer a few times, but because your signature was never provided, it fell through every time. On the registry, you remain the sole 60% majority shareholder. That is unshakable." On my way out of the company, I briefly stopped by a fine dining restaurant I frequented. The owner warmly grabbed my hand and carelessly let slip a comment. "Mrs. Sterling, the CEO was here a few days ago with a woman looking like a young newlywed. They looked so affectionate, I assumed she was your niece or something." Without changing my expression in the slightest, I smiled brightly as usual, paid the bill, and walked out the door. Returning home that night, my husband casually slid a thick stack of documents across the dining table. "Honey, I am trying to neatly consolidate some real estate and bank accounts under the company's name. I just need you to sign this one time. Organizing it under a single name makes the tax processing much cleaner, and it will be easier for both of us." I carefully picked up the documents with both hands, slowly flipped through them page by page, then gathered them neatly, folded them deeply once, and quietly shoved them into the inner pocket of my bag sitting nearby. "My head feels a bit heavy today. Let me look it over for a few more days, and we can talk about the signatures then." From across the dining table, I quietly stared straight at the faint spasm that flashed across the corner of my husband's mouth. The next morning on my way to work, I pulled out a business card I had received through an attorney acquaintance from the inner pocket of my handbag, gently running my fingertips over it. The card bore the neat lettering of a managing partner at a Wall Street law firm that handled family law, criminal cases, and corporate disputes all in one place. I gently pressed the attorney's direct number on my cell phone and left a voicemail in a clear voice to secretly schedule our first consultation. Attorney, this is Claire Sterling. I have a matter I would like to consult with you about privately, without anyone else knowing. If possible, could you make some time for me this week? Hanging up the phone, I quietly ran the back of my hand over the phone that held photos of the lease agreement, the wire transfer records, and the fertility clinic text message deep inside my bag, and slowly directed my steps toward the company's main entrance. As the scenes of 15 years that had flashed through my mind all at once settled down, I returned to the heavy breathing of my husband collapsed on the carpet. A faint white foam spread like a band around the corners of his mouth. One of his hands clutched the collar of his dress shirt, and his toes twitched slightly on the carpet. The scene entered my vision like a crystal-clear screen. Taking exactly one step backward from that spot, I pulled my cell phone from my handbag and quietly opened the photo gallery. The texture of the white powder grains that had floated on the soup earlier, and the label of the small pill vial reflecting at a slant inside the desk drawer. Every single photo was sitting there in vivid detail. At that exact moment, Harper grabbed the edge of the desk with both hands, stumbled heavily on one leg, and slumped down right where she stood. Mrs. Sterling. Suddenly, my stomach hurt so much. Please, do something, please. Thick, cold sweat poured down Harper's yellowish face like heavy bands. I quietly watched straight on as she trembled, wrapping her hands around her swollen belly. Without turning off my phone screen, I opened the office door and threw a clear command toward the hallway. Secretary's desk! Whoever is out there, call 911 immediately, and call the police at the same time. One person dial 911 for EMTs, another call the police separately. Do it now. From the hallway, someone let out a short scream, and the sound of a receiver being frantically snatched up could be heard. I turned my steps back inside the office. The desk drawer had shaken slightly from the impact of being opened earlier, causing the small pill vial to roll out from the back and lie sideways on the carpet. Pulling a clean handkerchief from my bag, I carefully wrapped the vial without letting a single fingertip touch it, and placed it safely on the corner of the desk. The vial's label clearly displayed an English medical abbreviation, along with a small warning symbol indicating it was strictly prohibited for use by pregnant women. Typing the abbreviation into my phone's search bar, lines of text appeared on the screen explaining that it caused fatal miscarriages in pregnant women and placed severe strain on the heart. Feeling something cold sink vividly deep into my chest, I barely suppressed the trembling in my fingertips. Next, I visually confirmed the position of the small CCTV camera mounted in the corner of the office ceiling and spoke clearly to the head of the secretary's office once more. Draft an official preservation request immediately for every single frame of the CCTV footage inside and outside the CEO's office, from the morning commute hours until now. Call building security separately to ensure nothing is arbitrarily deleted. While the head administrator trembled and gave a short reply of understanding, Harper, slumped on the carpet, lifted her cell phone with both hands to call someone for help, but tilted sideways and dropped it. As Harper's phone landed on the carpet, the screen lit up brightly again. In that brief moment, a single text message floating at the very top of the screen entered my vision with absolute clarity. Can't do lunch today. The wife came in early. You know how it is. The sender's name was clearly displayed as none other than my husband Julian, and the timestamp was the exact time my husband claimed he was stepping into the hallway to take a client call. Without laying a finger on it, I took a clear photograph of that screen with my own phone. While the paramedics carrying stretchers rushed into the office, Harper stared blankly at the ceiling, bearing an expression of someone who still could not comprehend why she had collapsed like this. Mrs. Sterling, why am I like this? Did I eat something wrong? That soup. Was something wrong with that soup? Without adding a single word to Harper's trembling voice, I quietly extended the handkerchief-wrapped vial toward the paramedic, checking her vitals. This is a drug highly likely to have been inside the soup the patient consumed. Please make sure the ER checks this immediately. While the paramedic gave a short nod and carefully placed the vial into a plastic evidence bag, another team of EMTs on the other side of the office was sliding a stretcher under my husband's shoulders and legs. As two detectives subsequently opened the door and entered the office, I politely handed over the yellow envelope I had prepared in advance with both hands. Photos of the soup bowl and powder, a copy of the video and photos on my phone, the secured vial, photos of the inside of the desk drawer, and the CCTV preservation request. I have gathered them all in this envelope. The original video preservation request has already been filed with building security. The middle-aged detective standing in front took the envelope with both hands and looked at me quietly for a moment. Ma'am, It could not have been easy to organize all this in such a situation. Once the ER treatments are concluded, we will hear your detailed statement at the precinct. From one corner of the secretary's office, two employees covering their mouths with the backs of their hands could be heard quietly whispering to each other. The CEO always took such good care of his wife's health, and now he is the one collapsing like that. But why is Secretary Harper collapsing too? Rumor has it she is pregnant. How did they both go down at the same time? Even in the very spot where those whispers could be heard, I did not offer a single word of excuse. I simply walked slowly toward the office window. Beyond the glass, the sight quietly unfolded of two ambulances, sirens wailing loudly, pulling up to the main entrance, loading my husband and Harper onto stretchers one after the other, and speeding off toward hospitals in different directions. I stood at the office window, my hands gathered neatly, silently watching the red flashing lights of the two ambulances stretch out over the gray city roads and fade away. There was no longer any trembling left in my gathered hands, and deep inside the handbag resting quietly at my feet, the promissory note, investment agreement, and shareholder ledger copy, written personally by my father 15 years ago, sat firmly tied, holding a heavy weight. In the hallway of the university hospital emergency room, medical staff following the stretchers frantically looked around and shouted loudly, asking if there was a guardian present. I stepped forward and answered in a composed voice. I am the legal wife for CEO Julian Sterling. The patient Harper Quinn is an employee from the company's secretary office. Both individuals collapsed together inside the same CEO office. A young doctor in ER scrubs quickly flipped through the chart and immediately followed up with a stern question. Patient Harper Quinn is currently facing an imminent risk of miscarriage, with signs pointing to drug poisoning. If there is any food, medication, or anything at all they consume together, you must tell us immediately. I pointed with my fingertip to the yellow envelope held neatly by the detective standing to the side, looking the doctor straight in the eye. A bowl of lobster bisque, a white powder mixed inside it, and a pill vial that rolled out of the CEO's desk are the core items. The vial was secured by the paramedics into a separate bag and brought up here to the ER. The middle-aged detective beside me pulled the handkerchief-wrapped vial and the phone evidence out of the envelope and calmly added a word to the doctor. This vial has been submitted for official preliminary testing to the state crime lab. We ask for your cooperation to ensure the results are shared with the attending ER physicians. Amidst the constant rush of footsteps in and out of the ER treatment rooms, less than an hour had passed before my mother-in-law, Eleanor, came running down the far end of the hallway, clutching the hem of her black coat in one hand. As soon as Eleanor spotted me, she sprinted over, grabbed my collar fiercely with one hand, and screamed in a shrill voice, "You wicked thing! What on earth did you do to my son? What did you do to make my boy lie there like that?" Taking one calm step backward, I gently removed Eleanor's hand from my collar and did not utter a single word of excuse. The detective standing nearby stepped between us, separating Eleanor, and calmly intervened. "Ma'am, we will explain the details of the ongoing investigation shortly. First, there must be no disturbances among family members in the ER hallway." More shrill sounds poured from Eleanor's mouth, but I slowly turned my back on that spot and moved my steps toward the maternity ward. In the maternity ward, Harper, who had narrowly escaped a miscarriage, clutched her swollen belly with both hands on the hospital bed, letting out a long sob in response to the detective's first question. "Detective, I will tell you everything. It is CEO Julian's baby. I was promised the wife's position. He said he would move me to the vice president's spot as soon as it opened up." Harper's sobs broke off syllable by syllable, only to resume as another stream of confessions spilled out sequentially. The condo in Soho, the CEO signed the lease under his own name for me. Company funds were deposited every month into a corporate account I set up under an acquaintance's name. I really did not know it would be such a huge problem. Leaning quietly against the wall by the hospital room door, I carefully engraved every single line of Harper's tearful confession into a place deep within my chest. Walking far down the hallway until I reached the glass wall of the intensive care unit, I stared quietly for a long time at the profile of my husband, lying there with an oxygen mask over his mouth. The neat touch of my father handing the envelope to his son-in-law with both hands in the spring 15 years ago briefly flashed in my mind, but I quietly folded that memory and slowly pushed it deep into my heart. Just then, my brother Nolan came running urgently from the end of the hallway, his suit jacket flapping, and pulled me into a deep, one-armed hug. "Claire, I am so sorry. I should have brought her to a better hospital sooner. From now on, I will be right by your side." I rested my forehead quietly on my brother's shoulder for a moment, then slowly straightened my posture, looked him in the eyes, and spoke calmly. Nolan, let us gather all the deposit records of our family's funds, the promissory note, the investment agreement, and the shareholder ledger copies into one place. This cannot be delayed any longer. My brother nodded deeply and gently enveloped my hands with both of his. That evening, moving to the police precinct interrogation room, I neatly placed the separately organized evidence packets on the desk one by one. The copies of the corporate credit card statements, the Soho condo lease under Harper's residency, the photo of the fertility clinic appointment text, the pictures of the bisque and the powder, the CEO office CCTV footage, and the preliminary toxicology report for the vial. Facing the desk neatly arranged with these items, the detective sitting across from me let out a long sigh. Ma'am, with this much evidence, this is no longer a simple embezzlement case. It paints a clear picture for an attempted murder charge. We will review filing for an arrest warrant with the prosecutor's office tonight. The interrogation room door opened once, and Eleanor, having barely been guided in as a guardian, sat in a chair to the side, trying to gently hold her daughter-in-law's hands. Claire, please, just this once. Just cover this up for the sake of our family's honor. You know what will happen to our family name. Julian is still your husband, is he not? I gently removed Eleanor's hands with one hand and slowly stood up from my seat. That night, receiving a call from her lawyer that an arrest warrant for her son's attempted murder charge had been officially filed, Eleanor called her daughter-in-law directly for the first time in their 15-year marriage, begging in a trembling voice. Claire, honey, please save him just this once. Our family's entire reputation is about to collapse instantly. How can a daughter-in-law do this to her husband's family? Without adding a single word of reply to that trembling voice, I quietly pressed the end call button with my fingertip. Exiting the hospital lobby, deep inside my handbag lay the promissory note, the investment agreement, and the shareholder ledger copies personally written by my father 15 years ago, tied tightly, carrying the heavy weight of an invoice ready to collect a 15-year debt. The next morning, across a long mahogany table in a Wall Street law firm conference room, I quietly untied the knot of the yellow envelope. From inside, the promissory note, the investment agreement, the shareholder ledger copies, and the transfer receipt for my family's $700,000 were spread out neatly in a row. Sitting across from me, the managing partner pushed up his glasses and meticulously traced each document with his fingertip. Miss Sterling, legally and on the registry, the absolute 60% majority shareholder is exactly you. Since CEO Julian Sterling has been indicted and detained, making him unable to perform his duties, you can immediately request the convening of an extraordinary general meeting of shareholders as the 60% stakeholder. I took a deep breath, then neatly gathered both hands on the table and answered in a crisp voice. Then please file the request immediately. I will not let a single share slip away. A few days later, a notice convening an extraordinary general meeting of shareholders under the name of 60% stakeholder, Claire Sterling, was posted neatly on the bulletin board in the company's first-floor lobby. Two employees looking at the notice covered their mouths with the backs of their hands and whispered to each other. Mrs. Sterling. Our Mrs. Sterling was originally the 60% shareholder. We all thought it was the CEO's company, but the real owner was Mrs. Sterling all along. On the day of the general meeting, taking my seat at the head of the boardroom table, I submitted a resolution to dismiss my husband as CEO under my authority as the 60% stakeholder, and the motion passed on the spot without any significant opposition. Immediately following, at the board of directors meeting held in the same room, the motion to appoint a new CEO was passed, accompanied by the crisp sound of pens, decisively signing the approval documents line by line. After all the meetings concluded, I returned to the empty boardroom and stood quietly in front of the nameplate on the main desk. I slowly lifted the nameplate reading CEO Julian Sterling with both hands, set it quietly on the edge of a side table, and placed the newly engraved CEO Claire Sterling nameplate neatly front and center. I felt the version of myself who stood in the kitchen at 5:30 in the morning for 15 years, and the version of myself placing the nameplate here today, quietly overlapping into one. A few days later, around lunchtime, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law stormed into the middle of the company lobby, raising their voices. Claire! Where is Claire? Let us settle this as a family. How can you just cut out your husband without a single word of discussion with his siblings? Sister-in-law, let us just meet and talk once. We are family after all. Family. Looking down at the scene quietly through the glass window of the boardroom, I delivered a single instruction to the head of security in a crisp voice. Those two individuals. Register them officially as banned from the premises starting today. Do not let them take a single step further into company business under the pretext of being family. While the security personnel politely blocked the two, my sister-in-law was dragged out shouting, "Sister-in-law!" until the very end, but I did not step down toward that spot even once. The following afternoon, my mother-in-law, Eleanor, came directly to the CEO's suite door. As soon as she walked in, she dropped straight to her knees on the carpet. "Claire, honey, please forgive him, just this once. I know all about the devotion you showed, frying meatballs in the kitchen every morning at dawn. I know it all, so please, just save our Julian this one time." I quietly looked straight at Eleanor's hands, which trembled in the empty air for a long time as she knelt. The image of that autumn morning in the dark kitchen at 5:30, when she merely turned up the volume on the television while walking from the living room to her bedroom, floated vividly in my mind. "Eleanor, you never once stepped out into the kitchen on those early mornings. I have no right to accept you kneeling today. Please stand up." A deep sob escaped Eleanor's mouth, but turning away from her hands, I stood up from my seat, opened the doors of the CEO's suite wide with both hands, and left them open. That same week, while going through the company bank accounts and real estate deeds line by line with the accounting director, the director tapped the approval folder lightly and opened his mouth in a low voice. CEO. Regarding that unidentified new shell company I mentioned last time, the registered representative remains a proxy, but tracking the flow of funds one step further, the actual beneficial owner has been confirmed as Harper Quinn. The luxury condo in Soho, 2 vehicles, and all the company funds siphoned off every month went straight there. Tracing the lines of the statements the director pointed out neatly with my fingertip, I replied in a calm voice. "Director, please file for a preliminary injunction to seize all of those assets immediately. Proceed with criminal charges for occupational breach of trust and embezzlement simultaneously. Against Harper Quinn, officially file a separate civil lawsuit for alienation of affection, along with liability for aiding and abetting the embezzlement." A few days later, my husband's defense attorney visited the CEO's suite in a sharp suit, smoothly sliding a thick settlement agreement across the desk. "CEO Sterling, Julian Sterling's side has prepared a settlement sum. The request is for you to withdraw all lawsuits in one go, from the criminal charges to the civil claims, if possible." I quietly looked over the settlement agreement, then pulled out 2 sets of documents I had prepared separately from my desk drawer, placed them directly on top of his agreement, and slid them back across the desk. "Here are 2 copies of the divorce petition and the separation of liability documents. Attorney, please deliver them carefully to your client yourself." As the attorney's shoulders twitched and he slowly stood up, taking the documents back into his hands, I rested both my hands quietly on the edge of the desk, looking straight at his retreating back. At dusk, on my way out of work, crossing the company lobby toward the main entrance, employees on both sides bowed their heads deeply in greeting, one by one. From inside my bag, I quietly pulled out one of my newly printed CEO Claire Sterling business cards, slowly running my fingertip over the 3 words of my name stamped upon it. Late that night, a photograph arrived on my cell phone screen with a short text from the detective. Under the bright fluorescent lights, the scene of that lobster bisque bowl that had sat on the office desk, now neatly sealed with an evidence sticker, resting securely in a compartment of the police evidence locker, was captured clearly, in a single frame. I quietly set my phone down on the desk, walked slowly to the window of the CEO's suite, and silently stared at the deep red light of the sunset spreading long across the city for a long while. On the morning of the sentencing hearing, I walked slowly toward the front gates of the courthouse, gently adjusting the buttons of my neat black suit once before heading straight in. Entering the courtroom, I took my seat perfectly in the middle of the front row of the gallery, resting both hands neatly on my lap. Soon after, the side door opened, and my husband Julian, wearing a gray prison uniform and restrained with wrist cuffs, slowly walked into the defendant's box. My husband's gaze stopped once at the front row of the gallery, locking eyes with me, but without letting my expression falter at all, I looked straight back into his eyes. The judge flipped through a stack of documents with his fingertips, reading down line by line in a crisp voice. "Defendant Julian Sterling, the court finds you guilty of all charges, including attempted murder and occupational breach of trust and embezzlement. The court judges the circumstances to be extremely severe, given that the defendant targeted his legal spouse using a substance clearly marked as fatal if used by pregnant women. A sob leaked out from Eleanor in a corner of the gallery, but I did not turn my head toward that sound even once. The judge quietly pressed a single sheet of paper, reading out the sentence line by line in a crisp, uncompromising voice. Regarding the concurrent crimes of attempted murder and occupational breach of trust and embezzlement, the defendant, Julian Sterling, is sentenced to 15 years in state prison. My husband's shoulders in his prison uniform slumped forward as if collapsing, his legs giving out as he stumbled, while the corrections officers on either side quietly supported him. I kept my hands neatly folded on my lap, neither standing up nor losing my composure, watching the entire scene straight on to the very end. That same afternoon, a separate sentencing hearing for Harper Quinn followed in another courtroom. The judge took a deep breath, looked straight at Harper, and calmly opened his mouth. Defendant Harper Quinn, regarding the charge of being an accomplice to attempted murder, the court finds you not guilty. However, regarding the civil liability for the affair and the charge of aiding and abetting corporate embezzlement, the court finds you guilty on all counts. Harper's shoulders dropped heavily, and her hands slid quietly down below her now empty belly. A few days later, in civil court, the judge read down the ruling for the alienation of affection damages line by line. Defendant Harper Quinn is ordered to pay $150,000 in civil damages to plaintiff Claire Sterling and must immediately return all corporate assets organized under Harper Quinn's name to the plaintiff's corporate entity. After the ruling concluded, Harper walked out the courtroom doors holding her stomach with one hand, staring blankly at the floor, slowly disappearing down the end of the hallway. A few days later, in the narrow hallway outside the prison visitation center, Eleanor, having just finished visiting her son, blocked my path with one arm. "Claire, honey, please. Just one petition letter to reduce Julian's sentence. I am begging you as a mother." As a mother, taking one step to the side to quietly evade her, I briefly looked straight into Eleanor's eyes. "There is no one left here for you to call honey or daughter. I am simply Claire Harrison. I am not a member of your family either." I quietly watched Eleanor's hand tremble in the air before dropping heavily to her side, then slowly took my steps down the end of the hallway, one pace at a time. A few days later, beside a bed by the window in my mother's hospital room, where the bright sunlight poured in, I quietly knelt down and took my place. From my bag, I pulled out the bank book showing the recovered $700,000 of family funds, along with the statement of the damages awarded, holding them neatly with both hands and placing them gently onto my mother's frail hands. "Mom, that envelope you and Dad handed over to your son-in-law 15 years ago, today I am returning it exactly as it was back into your hands. I am so sorry for everything all this time, Mom." My mother, who had struggled to gain strength in one hand since her stroke, barely supported the weight of the light bank book with her fingertips, looking straight at me quietly for a long time without a word. A thick tear slowly rolled down the corner of my mother's eye, and her dry lips moved quietly once. "Claire, our Claire, Mom just wanted our daughter to live a decent life. Our daughter has suffered so much." I gently wrapped my hands around my mother's frail hands and buried my forehead against the back of her hand for a long time. Next to me, my brother Nolan gently placed a hand on his sister's shoulder and added a word in a soft voice. "You did so well, Claire. Mom and Dad would both be so proud of our sister." Taking a deep breath, I slowly lifted my forehead from the back of my mother's hand, met her eyes, and quietly opened my mouth. "Mom, from now on, I will stay right by your side and take good care of you. Every Saturday, I will push all company work aside, hold your hand, and we will take a walk around the hospital courtyard together. Let us promise each other that, Mom." As the bright midday sunlight stretched long into the hospital room window, gently resting upon the back of my mother's frail hand and the recovered bank book, I sat quietly, watching the warm light linger on one family, finally together in one place, for a long time. Thank you so much for staying with this long story until the very end. There is a specific kind of loneliness known only to someone who has stood alone in a dark kitchen at 5:30 inches the morning, and to the fingertips that silently endure that loneliness. A day will surely come when your own name is carved clearly once again. Enduring is not the only virtue. Sometimes cutting ties is another form of courage and love. To all the mothers out there silently preparing a meal for their families again today, you have worked so incredibly hard. I support you from the bottom of my heart, hoping the day comes when your name is placed neatly in the spot where it shines the brightest. If you listened to this story until the end, please leave a comment letting me know you enjoyed it. I wish happiness to everyone who subscribes and leaves a like. Thank you so much for being here today.